biodiversity. If we look at other data points, which is at the bottom there, need another 700 billion or so a year for the biodiversity needs of the world. Basic financing needs are absolutely massive if we have to address the issue of climate change, biodiversity, urbanization in an integrated manner. This is the single biggest issue confronting us today. How do we get finance to flow for the technical solutions that we need quickly, which can contribute to a climate plus approach? Therefore, I always put that in the top over there as capitals, all sources. We have to leverage the power of policy in the public sector, the government. We heard from Kun Paupum about things like carbon taxation, but there are other issues, incentives for EVs, for example, which the government is working on, the power of public policy with the flexibility of the private sector. How do we combine those two to catalyze financing super quickly into all those issues that we have? And therefore, there are three things that we basically say. If you're looking at green finance, look at innovative financing instruments. We need to look at how to innovate finance. It's not simply a question of cheap money or concessional money for doing a climate project. We have to be innovative because we don't have that kind of money globally. So, under that, you've got to look at bonds, capital market instruments, de-risking funds, a massive issue. Many of the industries over here, I remember working with paper and packaging companies in another part of Asia. They simply didn't have the finance to invest in water treatment plants because the margin for profit was too thin. So how can we as a government or as a development bank like ADB de-risk the investment to make sure that we help a company, industry, go through a period of investment where the revenue lines are not very clear and then gradually start building up. De-risking transition finance, a very important concept. Similarly with blending and incentive linked. So if you pollute more, you get taxed more. That's a concept of carbon taxation. Another option is if you depollute more, do you get an incentive? A very interesting example happening, for example, in South America today, in Uruguay, is this issue of environmental improvement. It's called offset. So if you're able to do more greening of the forests, can there be an incentive provided for certain entities? Another structure of finance. Along with the technical solutions. So, we can see green pervading everything from industry. So how do we produce manufacturing, paper, steel, coal? How do we change technical solutions there to make it more carbon efficient? How do we live? So how do we consume less? How do we travel less? Or how do we travel more efficiently? But at scale, how do we bring in those technical solutions at scale? It's a big, big issue. And there are lots of solutions emerging. Battery storage is one on the energy side, water efficiency. But it even goes into sectors that we haven't thought of. Shipping industry. There's a lot of question marks over how much shipping contributes to global greenhouse gases. I think one of the numbers is around 3% globally. But we can find solutions to improve shipping lanes for better usage of fuel, less time spent in a port. Technical solutions can be created using digital technology, artificial intelligence, simply better management. Bringing it all together is that third circle over there. Increasingly, you will hear fears globally about something called greenwashing, which is that yes, we are putting money into something considered to be green, but is it really green? Is it really having an impact? For which you need that. You need to know what is the measurable impact of the project we're doing technically, or the money that is flowing. Therefore, measurable green impacts. Today, as Kun Paupum said, if we produce something in Thailand for export to Europe, the non-tariff barriers of Europe will be very critical, which will be looking at the actual green impact of that production process in Thailand. Therefore, having a globally aligned framework is critical to essentially making sure that as an economy, we in Thailand are globally aligned with green frameworks. So these are, I think, are fundamental pillars of transforming a green economy such as Thailand. Now, I wanted to talk about some of the examples because that was very academic, what I was mentioning. But, if we look at what we've been doing and we see some concrete examples, on the left-hand side, we've been lucky in Thailand to work with a number of agencies, starting with the Ministry of Finance, in the issuance of bonds, sustainability bonds. We've been working with the private sector, blue bonds, and so on. These are important because it just changes the mindset from raising money for one project to raising money for many projects through one instrument. The bonds work that ADB has been doing with the government of Thailand, with SOEs such as the National Housing Authority, just in the last 3 or 4 years, has raised almost $2 billion in the issuance and then subsequently led to another $10 billion worth of money being raised from the markets. $12 billion worth of green finance has flown through instruments. I think just about 10 bonds or 11 bonds in 4 years. That's a lot of money available, being flowing into green projects. If the bond is structured well and it's received well. Very powerful tool. I also want to talk about something we call national green finance facilities. It's super important, I think, when we are talking with Ministry of Industry in many of the countries or the climate change departments to help industries transition their manufacturing production processes into green, which requires de-risking funds. In Indonesia, maybe about 4 years ago, we created something called the SDG Indonesia One Green Facility to support Indonesia. It's a national green fund at a development bank, which basically uses a lot of government money and development money to de-risk underlying projects and blend financing from public and private. Very powerful. It is leveraging development money like ours 6 to 7 times. $1 of money from ADB can catalyze $6 plus from the private sector. A very important tool which reduces the upfront risk that many entities face. And lastly, the ACGF. Now, this is at a regional level. One of the issues that we'll all be talking a lot about over the next, bodies that we have, the ability to absorb carbon dioxide disappears 30% or 40%. Therefore, we also need to take care of biodiversity. We created something called the Nature Solutions Finance Hub in Bangkok last year for addressing the issue of how do we help develop biodiversity projects. And we are working very closely on developing projects in oceans health, water pollution, etc., through this agency, through this platform. If I bring it all together, we are a development bank. We are your development bank, as in Thailand's development bank, Asia Pacific's development bank. And we are here to help bring ideas and solutions from different parts of the world, build capacities, build technical solutions, and catalyze finance, but in specific projects. The importance of that is to create projects which can be replicated 10 times over, so that funds can be flowing in 10 times more than what we bring in, because the needs of green finance are so massive. And actually that, I think, is if there was one line I would lead for us to think about, it is for using development banks and government money as a catalyst to scale up green finance flows from capital markets, private sector, and the banks. I hope that leaves some food for thought. Very happy to discuss further. Thank you for having me over here today. Khap kun khap.
Thank you so much, Mr. Arnold. So please remain on the stage, and thank you so much for the appetite and insight on this matter. Excuse me, sir. Could you please sharing with us more about what the starting point for the green finance?
Sure. I think the starting point for green finance is really to identify the impact that finance will have on reduction of greenhouse gases. That's a starting point. And then, of course, we can scale it up into many, many more different issues. But that's the starting point.
ถ้าชอบกดไลค์ใช่กดแชร์และอย่าลืมกดติดตามทุกช่องทางของฐานเศรษฐกิจด้วยนะคะ